And it's great to have you here on Palm Sunday. And you come and join us in the middle of a kind of series that we're doing, which is kind of series. It is a series, I don't know why I said kind of. Talking about the 7 sayings of Jesus on the cross. And we're a church that is based on the tangible presence of Jesus. That's prayer, that's worship, that's Awaken 50 for both men and women. And in the coming week, when we come in for Holy Week, the church can be set up this evening. And it's going to have prayer stations, which are going to go through these 7 different sayings of the cross as we go. So do engage with that. That's about the tangible presence. We're also a church based on countercultural formation, which is going against the tide of the world and actually formed in the likeness of Jesus Christ. And we're a church that's based on another pillar, which is sacrificial mission. We go and love and serve the Lord. Part of that mission is holiday clubs. Part of that is love Easter parcels that we've delivered. Part of that mission is Alpha and inviting people to know the love of Christ. But we've been on a journey, and life is one long journey with different stops along the way. You know, this week on Friday, I had a wonderful day. I'll talk you through my Friday. I've got about 18 things to share, I said earlier, but we won't get all of them covered. But I had a lovely Friday. Friday, I went to walk with someone I walk with every other, disciple them. That was a great morning, just walking with someone and just, coming away and knowing what to pray for them. So meeting them every 2 weeks for something like 4 years now as they go towards marriage. And it's like, this is what I'm called to do. And then came back, jumped in the car, drove down, and we had the amazing privilege to be at the formal legal sort of celebration service at Worthing Family Court, where the Hills welcomed in Jake into their family. We've known each other before. There was a really funny moment. They wanted a picture of everyone. They got Joseph. If you know Joseph, Joseph was legging it. He's got, Joseph has got Down syndrome, but he is a life and soul of the party. He was not to be controlled in that call. And actually, he was in the judge's chair. And we came up for a picture, and I walked up. And I came up, and the door suddenly flew open where the judge normally comes through, and there's a security guard there. And he looked at me and he said, I said, "You've come to be in the photo as well?" He went, "No, someone's hit the panic alarm." Joseph had hit the panic alarm. There we go. And then I got the privilege to then come out, get changed in the car park, and then Phil picked me up, and I went on the second part of our pilgrimage. We're walking the Pilgrim's Way, and we jumped in the car, drove over to a village, I have no idea where, and then we walked to Alton. And Alton's is a special place for me because that's where my sister went to school for 3 or 4 years. I haven't been back there since she was 18 years old. And suddenly that journey of life, all in one day, as I came in to land in the evening, where I came in and took part in the youth family quiz. I arrived late. And all I'm saying about my team is when we arrived, we got 30 out of 30. We didn't get that before, Lil, did we? But those are winners, the Sanders and the Clarks. If you're in the house, well done. They won the cup. But that's the journey. Oh, there you are, Karis and Caleb. Well done, you're smiling away at yourselves. But that's the journey of life we go on. We go on the ups and the downs, the regrets. As many of you know, my twin sister that went to school in Alton, that's because she was spina bifida, went to a special school and she died, and that's part of my story of faith. That's why I came to faith at the age of 36, is I had nowhere to go with my pain. And the journey of the sayings of the cross is Jesus showing us the way to him, the way to release. So we're going to read a bit of scripture and then going to unpack it a little bit. Luke 23, verses 44 to 49. It was now about noon, and darkness came over the whole land until 3 p.m. For the sun stopped shining, and the curtain of the temple was torn in two. Jesus called out with a loud voice, "Father, into your hands I commit my spirit." When he said this, he breathed his last. The centurion, seeing what had happened, praised God and said, "Surely this was a righteous man." When all the people who had gathered to witness this sight saw what took place, they beat their breasts and went away. But all those who knew him, including the women who had followed him from Galilee, stood at a distance watching these things. We know the end result, don't we? We know about Easter Sunday, and we're going to celebrate that. But imagine being those people that have followed Jesus all that time and being standing at the foot of the cross, being his friends. You know, I just got that image of Jesus as he says those words of, you know, like I did 2 funerals this week. And often at a funeral, they show a montage of someone's life as you're sort of sitting there reflecting. And you get those great movies, don't you, where someone's life sort of pans out in front of them as they see little scenes from their life. And you almost see like Jesus being born or playing as a kid as Mary thinks about him as a little boy, you know, going to his own form of holiday club for the first century, being taught by his dad how to make tables and chairs, how knowing his dad, and then being a man and then growing into his ministry and finding these 12 friends that he does ministry with for 3.5 years. And then there's Mary Magdalene, who's been set free from 7 demons, set free from pain. All those stories flitting as the most beautiful person that's ever lived, Jesus Christ, dies. And says those words, Jesus called out in a loud voice. He cried, some translations say, Father, into your hands I commit my spirit. When he said this, he breathed his last. Sad moment in history, but a beautiful moment in history. And the best moment in history because we know what happened in that moment. And I wonder what he's teaching us today in that. It's funny, we started the 7 sayings and the first one starts with Father, doesn't it? Father, forgive them for they know not what they do. And then the other sayings on the cross doesn't include the Father at all. My God, why have you forsaken me? I thirst. And yet, as he comes into death, he comes back to intimacy with the Father. But we know that he's going to face the gates of hell and death. True abandonment, but true trust. And so we've been on that journey throughout these 7 sayings. We looked on the first one at, my God, Father, they forgive them for they know what they do. We looked at forgiveness. We looked how the crowd mocks him. We look today at the way the world mocks Jesus. Yet we knew in that phrase how big the gospel is, because it cut across moral boundaries. The criminal was accepted into heaven. It cuts across racial divides. The centurion, the enemy of the Jew, was accepted into heaven. It cuts across the social ties. Where women were degraded in the first century, Jesus raises them up and they're the first witnesses. That's why Awaken 50 is going to be crucial for the church. To hear that voice, that activation in faith. And finally, he completely knocks it out of the way with Joseph of Arimathea, because even the rich person gets in. And so we find out in that first saying just the breadth, the depth, the height, and the love of God. And then we had Charlotte preach to us about see you in paradise and the way that the gospel can be instantaneous. It just meets heart to heart with Jesus. And then we had slightly out of sync, but I put it into sync today because actually we had Lisa come a couple of weeks ago and speak to us about the compassion of Jesus as he sorts out his family dynamic, as he calls his mother woman again to indicate that she's the second Eve, the person who redeems the story with the second Adam, Jesus, and says woman. And he sorts out his family there. And then we had, my God, why have you forsaken me? By will. Which means that we can call on God when we are in the most desperate of situations. If there's a diagnosis or a divorce or a miscarriage or a death, a disappointment and a hurt, we can know that someone is with us when we are forsaken. Psalm 22 tells the story of King David, telling the story of forsakenness and imagining what it would like to be killed. Yet Jesus was actually killed. And then we had Phil preach beautifully about thirst, about the thirst of Jesus, about some silly decisions he made in that. In Jerusalem, if you remember rightly, he went up the mountain on a pilgrimage, ran out of water, came home and was very dehydrated. But he preached beautifully about how to thirst, how we thirst. And then last week we had Jonathan with the words, "It is finished." He said it was the last words of Jesus on the cross in John's gospel. But we're in Luke's gospel. And he talks about the zeal, the German word for goal, for purpose, for finishing, and how we are to run the race well. And then the final phrase, "Father, into your hands I commit my spirit." You see, even on the cross, Jesus is on a journey. He is on a journey of forgiveness, of grace, of compassion. That's what the first three sayings are. He's pouring out the gospel, even when he's nailed on a cross. If I was nailed on a cross, I wouldn't be full of forgiveness. I definitely wouldn't be full of compassion. And I definitely wouldn't be full of grace. And then he enters into the place, the final moments on the cross where he is forsaken. That he knows that the end is near. That the whole purpose of his life is coming into land. And he comes and he is forsaken. And because he's absent from God, he thirsts. And he is dry. And then he knows the only place he can go in that moment is complete surrender to God. Doesn't move away from God, doesn't push God away, but he completely submits and commits. That word commit comes from a Greek word that means total surrender. It means entrusted. It means commended. Parthasomea. It is echoing the words of Psalm 31, verse 5. Into your hands I commit my spirit. Deliver me, Lord, my faithful God. Jesus is trusting God in this moment. And on our journey, our journeys will mirror this. We need forgiveness. We need grace. We need compassion. We need to know that in the depths, in the highs and in the lows. Because when in the lows we feel forsaken, we need to remember the forgiveness, the grace, the mercy, the love, the compassion of God. And in the forsaken moment, we will thirst. And we've got a choice to press in or bounce out. The only way to life is to bounce in, to walk through. Dane Ortland, the writer of the book Deeper, said the message of the Bible is quite strange. It's quite strange in the fact that it seems you have to go back before you go forward. Psalm 34:18 says, it might come up. The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. So it's in the Psalms. Proverbs 30, well done, this next one. I was getting onto that. Proverbs 3, verse 34. He mocks proud mockers, but shows favor to the humble and oppressed. Psalm 55, verse 22. Cast your cares on the Lord and he will sustain you. He will never let the righteous be shaken. There is something in our faith in Jesus that means that when we are broken, it seems that he's closer. And so, what do we get to learn from the last words on the cross? Is that connection with forsakenness, thirst. It is finished, and commit our spirit. It is finished means we know in reality that the war has been won, that death is defeated. We live in the now but not yet. There's no surety that our life will be easy from this time on. But having lived without Jesus and with Jesus, I can tell you with Jesus it's so much better. And so what does this teach us this morning? What can we go away with this morning? It's about letting go. Letting go and trusting. Letting go of control. Letting go of the need to be right. Letting go of the fear of conflict. Letting go of needing to be successful. Letting go of all the different things we put in our lives that's more important than Jesus. Letting go. When I was on a surveillance team in the police, one of the most important things in that surveillance team was trust. You needed to trust one another. If you didn't trust one another, when you went out and followed someone, and you didn't trust the colleague that was following someone, then you'd do something stupid, and you'd compromise the whole operation. So trust is really important in teams. Trust is really important in families. Trust is really important in sport teams. Trust is really important in our faith. And so we need to trust and let go. Henri Nouwen, the Catholic priest, who once was the head of Duke University, which is a very posh university, I'm told. He was head of the divinity department. He had everything. He'd achieved what he wanted because he wanted to please his mother. Whole of his life was to say, if I get to this position as a lecturer in charge of all this department, then my mum will be proud of me. And when he got there, he found it didn't fulfill him at all. Didn't make any difference to him at all. So what he did was he gave it all up. And he went to work on the L'Arche community in Canada. And the L'Arche community in Canada looks after those people with special needs. Not dissimilar to my sister's school in Owen. But there, Henri Nouwen, this Catholic priest who was in charge of a whole department of divinity, he looked after Trevor, who had special needs. And he learned more in that journey looking after Trevor without anyone watching. And he started to write about it. And he changed his life. He wrote books like The Wounded Healer, The Prodigal Son. But he tells a moment when he knew he had to let go. He was at a German circus and he was watching the trapeze artists train. And he was watching them as they were doing their spins high above the ground. And he watched them let go and grab hold. And he was in awe because he realized in that moment that he needed to let go and let God catch him. He needed to let go of all the dreams, all the control, all the things, and let God catch him. The thing is, it got desperate. That's where we get to at the cross. Desperate. As soon as there's something for us to clicking and do that we can make better ourselves, we don't let go. We try to be in control. And what Jesus does on the cross is let go. He let goes of a trapeze metaphorically and says to God, catch me. Catch me. And so, Haddon Robinson says this. Where was it that Jesus sweat great drops of blood? Not in Pilate's hall, nor on his way to Golgotha. It was in the Garden of Gethsemane. There he offered up prayers and petitions with loud cries and tears to the one who could save him from death. Had I been there and witnessed that struggle, I would have worried about the future. If he is so broken up when all he is doing is praying, I might have said, what will he do when he faces a real crisis? Yet when the test came, Jesus walked to the cross with courage, and his three friends fell apart and fell away. What we can learn about Jesus is he prepared for this moment. Preparation, meets our expectation. Jesus continually in the Gospels withdraws, refills, and pours himself out. He did so in the Garden of Gethsemane. He's prayed in different words, your will be done. It's the same word of commitment, of letting go and letting God. It reminds me of the story in Daniel of the Shadrach, Meshach and Abednego in Daniel 3 verses 16 to 20. Shadrach, Meshach and Abednego replied to him, King Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you in this matter. Here's 3 young men. They're teenagers. They're not very old. They've gone into exile. Israel's been defeated. They've been dragged off 1,000 miles away into the court of the Nebuchadnezzar, the Babylonian king. And they are expected to worship Nebuchadnezzar. And they say no. They stand up and then they commit their hands into God's. Because what they say then is, if we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to deliver us from it. So they trust, they've got faith in that moment. And he will deliver us from your majesty's hand. But even if he does not. So they're not praying because of the outcome. They've got complete trust that God is sovereign and is in control. We want you to know, your majesty, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold you have set up. Then Nebuchadnezzar was furious with Shadrach, Meshach and Abednego, and his attitude towards them changed. He ordered the furnace heated up 7 times hotter than usual and commanded some of the strongest soldiers in the army to tie up Shadrach, Meshach and Abednego and throw them into the burning furnace. They survive with the angel of the Lord, that some theologians think Jesus is right in the midst and saves them. And so for us today, it's whatever battles you're going through, whatever struggles you're in, be you in youth, facing troubles at school, be that near the end of your life in a hospital room. You need to commit your souls, your spirits to God. The thing is, we think it's a big thing for us, but actually it's just letting go and letting him be God. My experience is when I've let go and thought he's going to grab my hands, he's had hold of me the whole time. And so today, as we go into Holy Week, as we prepare, as we engage, as we share the good news, I want us to go into a space where we've let go of certain things. You see, the only place we can let go is if we abide. There's a slide. It's called the window of tolerance. There's the first one, that's it. To be truly healthy engagement, to have lots of tolerance in life, to be in a good place, I'd say we need to abide, which means we need to come and worship and pray. We need to be in those awakened groups. We need to give space for the grace of God. You see, if we're not healthy engagement, the second one now, John, we get anxious. This is where we have increased reactivity. We have lots of flashbacks. We have disorganized thinking and we get anxious. We get fight or flight. You know, I go and think about something at 4 o'clock in the morning. It just keeps on going and going on a repeat. That's not abiding with the Lord. It's being dratted. The next one is hypo-arousal. Not hyper-arousal, but hypo, and that's apathy. That's when we get numbed, we get depressed, we get shut down, we get passive, we lose our compassion, and we might feel burnt out. There's a slide of a graph now, John. So this is what it might look like. You might be in healthy engagement, but if you're not stepping in, if you're not pressing in, if you're not handing over, then you get to a place of being healthy engagement, but you slip down to apathy. It's when you get out of the fire. It's what we say about coming to church. You know, you take a hot coal out of the fire, about 10 minutes later it's cool. It's about stepping in with brothers and sisters together on this journey of engagement. The following one might be what I would do in the middle of the night. I've had a really good day. I've come to the night. Something's woken me up at 1 o'clock and it's just in my brain. And I just go round and round and round and round and I get anxious until I come back to God's word and submit to him. This might be a picture of my life somewhere along the line. Might be your picture. But abiding and submitting and letting go is where we need to be. And so how do we do that? Very briefly. If we're anxious, we cast our cares on God. This is what I do. So if I've got problems, I just go to him and go, Lord, I've got this. I've got this. I've got this. I've got this. I've got quite a long list. But I cast them onto God because I know he can handle it. I'm not risking my reputation ever. I'm risking God's, and God's reputation can always handle it. He can always deal with my problems. He can deal with my failures, my fears, my worries, my jealousy, my judgment, my annoyance, my anger. Cast them onto God. It's what I read it out a bit too earlier, but John was good. Psalm 55. Verse 22, cast your cares on the Lord and he will sustain you. He will never let the righteous be shaken. Because when I cast them, it brings me to that place of abiding and I become firm again. 1 Peter 5:7 says, cast all your anxiety on him because he cares for you. That is a beautiful verse, isn't it? That's a verse to go into in relation to Holy Week. Cast all your anxiety on him because he cares for you. He loves you. He sees you. And he knows you. And then what do we do the other way around? So if we're apathetic, if we're stuck, what do? We get thankful. We get gratitude. We remember what God has done. So when I get apathetic, I remember my story. I remember how he saved me in my lowest point. I remember how he drew me when me and Liz were separated for 7 months. That I wasn't a Christian and I found him and he drew me together and we restored our marriage. I remember the stories that we tell on Alpha. I go and sit and watch the Alpha stories on the videos that people made and I'm so thankful for God for all of those stories. I listen and I remember and I remember. I look out and go, oh my goodness, this is a full church. I don't think, oh my goodness, we need more room. I think of every different story that's here. I remember, and I remember. That is our call. To remember. And so, as we finish, I think if you do this, he'll rethink what your vision of your life might be. He'll take your motives and make them pure. And through the Holy Spirit, give you a will to carry them out. And so, today, as we enter into ministry time, we're called to empty ourselves, just as Jesus emptied himself. He emptied himself, deeming not to be worthy. He emptied himself and he came down and emptied himself entirely. And from being empty, he surrendered. And then he released. And then we get Easter Sunday, resurrection.